Good evening and welcome to the live stream of the Sunset Park podcast. This episode tonight is part of the election series special that we've been bringing to you as we count down to the election this evening. And tonight we are joined by two local neighbors who are very active in the community. We're going to talk about the election. We're going to talk about ranked choice voting. And at the end, we're going to make predictions on who we think will be our next council member. So I'd like to welcome John DeLuber and Jorge Muñiz Reyes. Welcome to the live stream.
Hey, thank you so much, Rob.
So ranked choice voting, that I think is something that is super interesting. It is also a game changer, if you will. And there's the possibility, right, that whoever individual's ranked as number one, right, might get outweighed by a number two or number three. And there's also rounds, right, that are going to take place, right? So in the first round, if the number one choice gets 50% of the vote or more, basically the race is over. And that person will be our new council member. If not, then I think the person at the bottom gets eliminated, and then everything goes again to get recounted. So it's super interesting, a little confusing, but what are your thoughts on this new ranked choice voting system? What do you think, Jorge?
Well, like you said, Rob, it's definitely a new way to vote than I think folks have been familiar with in the past. But from what I've been seeing, just having conversations with my neighbors, with folks, actually just a few minutes ago, actually just went to go vote, and it was good to see neighbors actually being able to stand side by side and say, you know what, rank this person and then rank this one. So it seems like folks are getting it. In theory, it should make the vote more democratic because people are being able to have their second and third opinions be able to count as well. And I think people are exercising it. And so it will mean that we will have to wait a little bit of time before the election results are known fully. I think about a week or so before it's fully clear. But I think, this is the first time we're doing it as a city. To be frank, the Board of Elections is a creature of habit. And I do wonder, whether or not they can manage this effectively. But the poll workers I spoke to, the people that I saw there, they seem to be doing their job. And so, I look forward to seeing what unfolds.
John, did you like this new system?
I thought that the ranked choice system was very good because one of the trickiest things I found when doing the voting is you have to decide what you want. There's been on of people being strategic. You say, do I think this person can win? Do I think that this person would be the one who's best to represent our community, but maybe I don't want another person? How do I decide that? With the ranked choice, I thought that was great because I got to choose the top five and say which ones I would want in the order I wanted. And yeah, it's still a little bit tricky to sometimes say, this person is also pretty good, it's still hard to do the weighing it out. But I thought it was really good because it allowed me to express support for candidates that I had never, that I wanted to. It gave me more. I felt like it gave more options and made me overall more comfortable with how the election will play out, especially as the choices are ranked.
There's definitely strategy behind it because I heard people doing all sorts of different things as they strategize to rank their 1, 2, and 3, and so on. I heard people say some things like, well, don't rank at all the person you definitely don't want in there. So I think that strategy is a big part of this. And, it's definitely, no question about it, a game changer. And like Jorge said before, it does seem like it will make this process a lot more democratic. And I also didn't feel so bad about just voting for one person, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of the candidates, I really like them.
Yeah.
I've known them for years, and some of them have done really good, solid work in the community. And it was just kind of tough to, like, if we were doing it the old way, to just pick one out of, like, let's say three top candidates that I personally really liked, which brings us to, and we've been hearing a lot about this throughout the different campaigns, the issues that are most important to the community, that we hope whoever our council member will be will address them when they're in office. And if there is an issue that you think should be at the forefront, that whoever wins needs to handle on day one, John, what issue comes to mind?
To me, the biggest issue is housing here in Sunset Park and throughout the community. Housing affordability is a huge problem. There's issues with different plans from the city and the state, but each of them have their own plans and they have their own abilities to tackle these issues. And that's one of the things that a city council member can do. We also voted for borough president. So borough president is another position where land use is tremendously important and where they can look at what the community's needs are, and they can try to take actions to increase the supply of affordable housing, or to do things like rent control or subsidies, especially with COVID. The last year, we've had issues where people haven't been able to afford their rents. We also have issues where small landlords are having trouble affording their mortgages. So is going to continue, I think, to be probably the number one issue in the year ahead, and for the council person to tackle on day one.
What about you? What do you think is, like, the top or issue that you feel whoever comes into office needs to take on immediately?
Yeah. For me, I think a lot about, at the most local level, things that jump to the top of my mind. Certainly, street safety. The mayor has a tremendous amount of control over what happens in our streets. And unfortunately, this past year, we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of, unfortunately, on deaths that have happened, in major injuries. De Blasio ran on a Vision Zero promise. We really haven't seen that being implemented, unfortunately, in every part of our neighborhood, certainly not in Sunset Park. I had a neighbor of mine actually close, lives right in this building. Fortunately, passed away, killed on 3rd Avenue not too long ago. So that's at the top of my mind. The waterfront, city owns through the Economic Development Corporation a tremendous amount of our waterfront. And, well, we've seen the private sector try to take it in a certain direction with things like luxury malls, like Industry City, trucking centers that are going up in Red Hook and Sunset Park. And, there's also other things that we've been seeing, like that new wind energy farm. So there's a different direction that could be taken, and the mayor and the local city council person could make a tremendous difference in that. And I also just want to say, I agree with John. Housing, of course, our people can't afford to stay here anymore. And when there's things like an empty hotel sitting there on 39th Street that could be working class housing, we'd love to see some leadership there, I think, from the city.
Yeah, I think whoever comes into office is going to really have to get in there day one. I mean, there's so many things, important issues that you brought up. The fact that our waterfront is so desirable by all these developers who want to put luxury shopping, luxury buildings, malls, and things like that, and just kind of change the whole landscape of the neighborhood, and that affects the cost of housing and how expensive it is for people to afford to live here, and even for homeowners. I've heard homeowners say, those, I guess, that maybe don't understand the intricacies of how rezoning can impact the homeowner. Things like, well, if the particular rezoning that from last year, if it were to pass and go through, well, then the price of my property would go up. So that has to be a good thing. But then behind that increased value of your property comes along higher taxes. And I've heard people who lose their homes in our neighborhood because they can't afford to pay the taxes. So things like that, are directly
Yeah.
affected by rezonings, and the whoever the council member is has to be very vigilant about that.
Yeah.
And
On
if
that
we
note, I would like to mention that this race was one where we saw the candidates talk about this, but we also saw the mayor, and we had some candidates for the mayor office who were very out of touch with what housing costs in New York. And given what you mentioned, Rob, about the tax issue, property taxes are something that's very uneven throughout the city, and that there are certain areas that may be doing more well economically that are having a lower tax burden than some of the areas that are really struggling. So I think that and all the others who are coming to office should definitely be paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely. Now, um, getting back to the election and to the campaign season, and here we are on election night. This was definitely an interesting campaign season because I saw a lot of different changes in how the candidates were campaigning. Number one, they're campaigning during a historic pandemic, right? I think that had to change the strategy, but then I also kind of noticed that candidates were getting very big, huge endorsements from some political heavy hitters, if you will. Now, I wanted to kind of discuss with you all the importance of endorsements. Do they really mean anything in these elections? Should candidates seek these endorsements out, or should we as voters take those endorsements seriously? What are your thoughts on endorsements, Jorge?
Right. Well, listen, I was just on the corner a few minutes ago. I was talking to a neighbor of mine, Laura Espinosa, and she always says one of the first things I measure about a politician is who's standing next to them. Who's the community that's lining up behind them? Do I recognize them? Do I trust them? Is it the NYPD Captains Association, or is it the teachers union? Is it um, you know labor unions that I recognize, or is it real estate money? And so I do think the kind of endorsements that candidates get, of course, people take that into account. But at the end of the day, that's just an element. I think that people will give people pause, will get people to notice. But at the end of the day, a candidate has to stand by his words and their actions, and that's who ultimately folks are selecting. So, certainly, at least for me, as I was thinking about the different candidates that we got on the ballot, the endorsements did weigh on my mind. But I think, the candidate at the end of the day is the one that has to implement those ideas. But I do think, people pay attention to the endorsements for sure.
John, did in your case, did the endorsements influence you at all in any way with who you voted for?
Oh, endorsements are so tricky because so I like all of us, I'm sure, got tons of mailers this year with these people stand behind this person, these people stand behind that person. And if it's a person I know and I trust, like Jorge's point, that's a person who I'm going to pay attention to, somebody who's involved in an issue that I care about. But sometimes some of the people on there, I don't really know who they are. Some of them are people who are like borough presidents in other places, or council members in other districts. When it's the local people, when it's the assembly member, when it's a state senator, when it's somebody who I know and see in the community, I'm more interested in their opinion than I would be as far as somebody from somewhere else. And I mean, in terms of unions and issues like that, I'm a member of a union, and my union endorsed people that some of them who I want to support, and some of them who I actually didn't. And that was kind of a bummer. So it kind of made me realize that, like, for these endorsements, that there is a guide, and if you're not taking part in that part of the process, then decisions get made. And I know that a lot of people do take it seriously. They see that their union has said that this is the candidate to support, so they support it. Or if the political party they belong to has a preferred slate. In Brooklyn today, the Democratic Party was most of the primaries going on. And the party slate they get in mailer, and a lot of people take that seriously too. One thing that I think was very helpful, I talked to a lot of my members of my family who use the NYC Votes Guide, and that they found that the statements from the candidates themselves were more important than the people who had endorsed them. So I think endorsements play a role, but they're the only thing that factors in. And I definitely don't think and I definitely don't think that for many voters that is the thing that they will use to decide. For some, yes, but others, no.
I know one particular endorsement that I was really interested in watching where it would go in this particular race for District 38 City Council was DSA's endorsement, right? And I remember that endorsement when it was up for grabs, if you will. And I was on top of that because I was really interested because I think over the years, DSA has become very influential, very noticeable, and very out there. And I was personally extremely shocked when I saw DSA endorsing Alexa Aviles over who I thought would get the endorsement early on, which I thought Rodrigo was going to get that endorsement because of his involvement throughout the years, being very very active in DSA with DSA folks. So I was completely surprised, but then when I broke it down further, I said, well, it seemed like it was something very strategic on their part. And I guess strategy is always a big part of how political decisions and moves are made. But, taking into consideration how influential DSA has become in local politics, I think when DSA first jumped on the scene, it was viewed as a very grassroots movement. Everything they did seemed to be very grassroots. But how do grassroots movements like DSA and others avoid becoming part of the machine that they set out to defeat originally, right? How what are your thoughts on that,
Mm-hmm.
Jorge, if you will?
Sure, sure. So I think you're definitely right, Rob, that the Democratic Socialists of America certainly, I think at least since 2018, have been on the map politically and have been winning big races with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, with Marcela Martinez, who of course is our newest state assembly person here in Sunset Park and Red Hook, and people have given them a lot of respect. But these kinds of club politics, we've always had them in the Democratic Party. There's always been groups of neighbors that have been very passionate that follow this very closely. Before the Democratic Socialists of America, y'all probably remember we had New Kings Democrats, which in North Brooklyn did good work. And the reason that these kinds of groups exist is because the formal Democratic Party, the Brooklyn Democratic Party, that all of us, if we vote Democratic, we're formally a part of. The reason they don't exist is because, the reason that they exist is because unfortunately the Brooklyn Democratic Party has not tremendously done a great job at keeping members informed. I was part of an effort, about 2 years ago to start just the first local meeting of Brooklyn Democrats here in Sunset Park and Red Hook, because for more than 10 years, the Brooklyn Democratic Party hadn't even bothered to hold a meeting out here. So, when you have that kind of power vacuum, groups like the Democratic Socialists of America do step in, and, whether they can stay rooted in their communities whether they can stay grounded in that way, well, that really depends on the membership and the people that choose to step up and be a part of it.
So, John, do you think they are the new powerhouse in local politics?
I think that they're an important voice, but I don't think that they're the powerhouse yet. One thing I noticed during this election was while they did endorse Alexa Aviles, they stayed out of a lot of the other races. Like I know mayor, people were several of the candidates courted DSA, and the DSA did not make any stand there. I also think what Jorge said about the old school, about the different political clubs and the different machines is also something really interesting to pay attention to, because again, going back to Alexa and going back to the previous question about endorsements, it was very interesting to see that she had the endorsement of Congresswoman Velasquez, of Marcela Matenas, and a few others. And that's kind of interesting, because I know that a number of years ago, when Councilmember Menchaca was elected, there was a lot of coverage in the press about how Congresswoman Velasquez was kind of one voice in the Brooklyn Democratic Party and was opposed to the mainstream ones. With I think it was Vito Lopez at the time ran the party, and so there are these groups that do in a way vie to influence the party. For us, it's kind of good when we have people who are associated with these different groups who agree with each other, because then they might be more likely to work together in the future on issues. I think we've seen that with the state Senate, how a couple years ago, I remember, Rob, you talked about the IDC and how they were kind of stalling things up, and then a couple to run candidates who got their people in and who were able to do a big reform movement. And I think that the state Senate has been much more productive in the last few years in terms of passing legislation. So I think that the DSA is one of these groups that is important and is key. And the one thing I have to say about the DSA is it's kind of really changed the people. So before, I'm in my mid-30s, right? And when I was growing up, I feel like people said socialist was like a scary word. It was like that you thought that they were like people who were in favor of totalitarians and stuff like this. And no, it's just a different philosophy of governance. And that the Democratic Party itself was very kind of hostile to socialists within its movement. And the DSA has made it okay for people who are overall on the left to come together and say, you know what, I believe that we can have a role for government that is different than we had envisioned in the past. And it's okay to say that. And it's something that's really an important view that we need to take into consideration, both in the party and in society at large. So
Very interesting. Now, Jorge, before you came on, you said you had just walked in from voting. How I voted during the early voting over the weekend. There weren't too many lines during early voting. What were lines like this evening? Was there a lot of people out there voting? Was it slow? What was it like?
Yeah, so I just voted about an hour back or so, and I definitely did see a lot of energy out on the block. You know, Our Lady of Perpetual Help is one of the biggest poll sites that we have in the area. So there's always a tremendous amount of candidates that come by, that stand by there. And this evening, I saw just at my poll site 2 candidates for the city council race. I saw in person there Cesar Zuniga. I saw in person there Rodrigo Camarena. And inside, when I walked into the poll site, it seemed active. It seemed like there were folks probably like myself, just coming out. It just probably finished work and were casting their ballot. I did, I have seen it more active. Obviously, the presidential election that just happened, I saw a tremendous amount of more people there. But definitely, at least at my voting machine that I got to place my ballot into, had told me that about 100 or so people before me, there were about 5 machines or so there, had cast their ballot. So we'll see. We do know historically, unfortunately, in many New York Democratic elections, voter turnout has been low. I mean, I think de Blasio, right, he got elected in 2017 with something like 14, 15% of like the registered voter count. So, these elections, especially when they're local, they do tend to be lower than the presidential election. But that just means also that your each and every single vote matters more than ever. When you have the turnout in that way.
How big do you think the absentee ballot portion of the vote will be? I know that for the assembly race, that was a big chunk of the vote where Felix Ortiz had basically thought he'd won the race and he declared himself the winner, only to, when the final numbers were counted at the end of the week, everything tallied pointed to Marcela being our new assembly member. Do you think that that's going to be the case here as well? That absentee ballots are going to play a big role in this election? What are your thoughts on that, John?
I don't think absentee ballots are going to be as big a role as they were last time. And I think that's because even though we are still in a pandemic, a lot more people have been vaccinated. The state has eased a lot of the restrictions. So up, more people are maskless and things like this. So I think a lot of people feel safer to vote in person. I know that in the last primary for the assembly last year, I was very, me and my family, we were very worried about this because, my in-laws are seniors and we're like, if we're going to go into the polls, are we going to worry about contracting the virus and then like everyone in the house gets it and then our now a lot of people have already had it or they've had the vaccine, so that it's more, people feel more comfortable going in person. I also think that the early voting has helped with that too, because now you have a longer time, so you don't have to worry about the rushing in on election day when there might be lines. So I think that absentee ballots will be a factor, but I don't think that they're going to be nearly.
So, Jorge, do you think that we can safely have a winner without worrying too much about what the absentee ballots are going to say?
I definitely do agree with John that there's more confidence, I think, in voting in person than there was in just the most recent primary election that we did, where we elected a new state assembly person. Just before I came over here, I was at the deli and the bodega folks over there, they saw my I voted sticker and they're like, "Oh, yo, when do the polls close? I gotta go vote. Gotta make sure that I get that vote in person." So I definitely do sense that there's more confidence to vote in person. However, I do think that there will be a significant number of people that do vote by mail, because they did do it in very large numbers, in unprecedented numbers, really. And like you just said, Rob, that's what made the difference in the most recent primary election that we just did last year with Marcelo Martinez, where we elected a new state assembly person. So many people have also, because of the pandemic, tried voting that way for the first time. I definitely have, friends of mine that chose to vote that way, even though they could vote in person. And so, the experience of the pandemic, I think, has trained a lot of people to vote over the mail. So I don't think it's going to be quite as big as it was last time around, but I do definitely think it's going to be a big factor. And we definitely, without counting them, the results will be indeterminate. And already because of the ranked choice vote, it would be, it's going to be about a week or so before we know the real results.
Yeah, during the assembly race, I voted. I voted by mail, and a lot of my family, my parents, friends, they all voted by mail. I mean, just during that whole time, just in general, like I think back to a little bit over a year ago, at the start of the pandemic. I mean, I don't know about you all, but it was scary. Like the whole, like I think back, I think back that whole year, and it's almost like it happened, but it didn't happen. Like it's all kind of like a haze, and it was a really scary time, and here we are now. Over 70% of our population is now vaccinated, and people are more comfortable voting in person. During that time, I was like, no way, let's just vote by mail, and we voted that way because it felt like the safest way. Although there was still a little bit of uncertainty, right? Like, will this vote be counted? Will it make it on time? And so many things going on where people also were not trusting the system in place to make sure that our votes are counted. But now, I guess we go to the really interesting part of this conversation, and that is, can we predict, or who do you all think will be our next council member? Now I know there's so many other races going on, but I think this is as local as it gets. I am interested in who, of course, our next mayor is going to be. Although the candidates were not the most impressive, at least in my opinion. Like, I was like, this is who we have to choose from, and unfortunately, we have to choose. But the race that I am particularly super interested in is our local race here for this very important city council seat. And if we can all dare to make a prediction, John, who do you think our next council member is going to be?
Ooh, this is such a tough one because this campaign, as both of you have mentioned before, was done in a very non-traditional way. There was a lot more increased outreach on social media, but because things are starting to open up, we did start seeing candidates at events and things like that more. I actually was very impressed because we have never, as long as I can have lived here, ourselves through canvassing. We've always had we had two of the candidates themselves come by, and we also had candidates reach out via phone, and that really showed that these candidates are really passionate about the community, and they really want. It was just a very encouraging sign. That said, from all the outreach that I saw from all the candidates, I think that probably Alexa Aviles or Rodrigo Camarena have the strongest chance. Although I would not count out Cesar Zuniga. All three of them seem to be on all the different platforms and to be in and out in the community. So I think that it could be any of those, but I definitely, if I was a betting person, I would say probably, like, at least from all the posters I've seen and all the what people have been talking about when I talk to neighbors and stuff like that.
John, you're going to have to repeat your choice because you broke up there. Not your choice, but who do you think is going to win it?
Oh, I said probably Alexa or Rodrigo. It's hard for me to choose between the two of them. That's my guess.
Okay. Very good. Jorge, what are your thoughts? Who, if you had to predict, is going to be our next council member?
Yeah, so Alexa Aviles' campaign and Rodrigo Camarena's campaign definitely stood out to me as being particularly strong. I do think Alexa Aviles has had a very strong field presence. I definitely have seen that present, but Rodrigo as well. I've definitely seen a lot of youth. Just even just on my walk just to the poll site, was approached by 2 or 3 folks, young, youthful folks, people that I know in the community that have been lining up behind Rodrigo. And of course, Rodrigo is also someone that I've known and I sort of have seen as well. And then Alexa Aviles has been someone that I respected as an organizer a long time. From the days that she's been PTA president at PS 172. I've always seen her be tremendously powerful with parents, I know my neighbor down the block, Jovita, has been behind her from day one. If I was gonna make a prediction, I would guess that Alexa comes in first and Rodrigo second for City Council District 38.
Very, very interesting predictions for sure. Now, um, there's a candidate that didn't get talked about much, but I've seen him out there with a lot of presence, and not so much down like on Third, Fourth, or Fifth Avenue, but further up like Seventh and Eighth. And Yulin has been very active on Eighth Avenue, and just over the weekend, I was over on Eighth Avenue and the 60s, like 61st, 62nd, and you could not walk down a street without seeing big, gigantic Yulin posters, and I think that is a segment of the community that candidates and and political pundits can't forget about, right? I think that could he pull a surprise? I mean, that is very well possible. I think back to when Councilmember Menchaca was running for his reelection, and we had Chris Meow jump into the race from 8th Avenue, also jump into the race really late and had some really significant votes. I think he might have even had more votes than, I think at that time, was it Sara Gonzalez who ran? Like at that, yeah. I think it was Sara Gonzalez, Felix Ortiz, and he was like, I think he came in like third or maybe even close to second. And we didn't see him much, jumped in the race really late and pulled the surprise, if you will. So I'm definitely not falling asleep on Yulin and his followers. I do think that Alexa has a lot of heavy hitters behind her as far as political strength and power with all these very big endorsements. But I think there's also something very grassroots about Rodrigo's campaign. And like Jorge mentioned before, I saw a lot of youth, a lot of young people behind Rodrigo and working with him and advocating for him as who we should rank number one. So it's again really, really, really tough to predict. I think that the easy prediction is Alexa wins it all in this election because of the political powerhouses that she has backing her up. But we could see a surprise, right, with Yulin, and definitely Rodrigo is someone who is like right there, right behind her. So it's one of those too close, too tough to call. But I think it's going to be very interesting. And then also, let's not forget, I believe that there is another candidate who is a conservative, whoever wins will probably have to face off sometime. Yeah. Is it September? Is it
in November? I believe
November in general. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's someone we can't. I mean, that could be a very easy race, right? For whoever wins, just because those who historically have run as Republicans or as conservative party types, they don't do well in this district. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Well,
sorry. Go for
Rob,
it.
Rob, let's not forget. I mean, New York, before de Blasio, we had a Republican mayor basically for 20 years, with Giuliani and Bloomberg. And so, I mean, I know many of us that came of age, recently, with de Blasio being mayor since 2013, we tend to think of New York as this big blue progressive city. And, there is definitely a part of it that is, but we have also elected Republicans to to the mayor's office, and it's something that we can't forget either. And like you said, Rob, this is definitely the election for the Democratic primary election. I think many people like myself do expect that person to ultimately win in November, but that general election isn't insignificant, and it's only been in really in recent years that the Democratic Party has been in control of it as powerfully as it is right now. And then John, sorry, you were going to make a point as well.
No, I was going to agree 100% with you, Jorge. Yeah, we had a Republican mayor for a long time, and also a lot of people, definitely something to keep an eye on, because I was talking to a neighbor the other day who'd been a Democrat for 50 years, and I said, "Oh, what are you thinking about the primary?" And he's like, "I'm going to skip the primary." I said, "Why are you going to skip the primary?" He goes, "Well, I'll go vote for city council." He said, "But I'm not going to vote for mayor." And I said, "Well, why not?" He goes, because he wanted one of the Republican candidates, and he said, "So I don't support any of the Democratic ones." And I was he's one of these people who worries about crime, who's been here a long time, who remembers a lot of issues, and thinks that the Republican Party, or at least conservative people or conservative politicians, can maybe address some of those issues in a way that the Democratic Party cannot. And I think we've seen that somewhat in the mayor's race, because some of the candidates are running Democrats kind of made rightward turns. I'm thinking specifically of Andrew Yang, Ray McGuire, and Catherine Garcia have all kind of put out positions as conservative Democrats, because I think that New York really could swing either way. And I think it could even happen in our district. I do, again, for the predictions, think that we will still have a Democratic council member in the fall, but I wouldn't write anything out. And, it all depends on how the campaign goes and who turns out to vote and what people are concerned about. And November's a long way from now. So we could be in a very different place in so many ways, and that could definitely influence how people are voting.
Yeah, I can't particularly imagine, at least at the city council level here in District 38, for any candidate other than a Democrat winning this next council seat, regardless of who is running in November. I think it's extremely tough for someone from another party, a Republican Party or the Conservative Party, just because of the amount of youth, and I think younger folks who are now of age to vote tend to be on the progressive side of things. And I think those who are more on the conservative side, if you will, are an older generation who there's not that many more, not many people that share those views around in our neighborhood. So I don't know, in the last 20 years, or maybe even further than that we've had a council member who was not a Democrat or more progressive. So I think it'll be really interesting, but I cannot see someone other than a Democrat pulling a win in November. So for that reason, it's always safe to say that the council member in District 38 is always pretty much decided during the primaries, regardless of what happens in November. Is that something that you all agree with?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely at the local level, I think that's pretty safe to say. At the mayor's office level, I mean, let's see. I mean, right now, like John was saying, at the top of people's minds is certainly things like public safety, like crime, and there are certain people who will take a more conservative approach. So we shouldn't take anything for granted. Certainly, this election today caps a period of early voting, and mail-in ballots that are going to come in, and we'll see soon who the Democratic nominee is. And then, of course, like always, the power is with the people. If we elect a good strong Democratic nominee, I trust that they can prevail in November against whichever of the two Republican candidates. I think that are also up for that also have their election. We'll see. And I think if we can elect a strong Democrat, I feel confident that both the city council seat and also the mayor's office seat will stay in Democratic control.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Are there two candidates on the Republican side? Is that right? I know of one
I believe
who is
Eric
a
Frankel's
conservative.
running, right? As a
Yeah,
independent or conservative something.
Conservative something, I think. Yes, Conservative Party.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's anyone else.
Although I do want to add to this, though, I also could see a conservative Democrat winning in this thing. Rob, you mentioned this on the podcast a few months ago and said he was a dino, a Democrat in name only. And I know it was early in the campaign, so he was doing the message. But I mean, he's a small business owner and might have more conservative views. We have had conservative Democrats in this district. Before my time, but I believe Sal Albanese was a Democrat, but he's kind of a more conservative Democrat. I know he's trying to make a comeback right now in Staten Island. So I could see it's a Democratic candidate who might be more conservative than we would have expected at the beginning.
Yeah. They just seem to be dwindling in numbers over time. But I do remember Sal Albanese, and he was definitely of a different generation, and I think as the neighborhood has evolved, there's less and less Democratic conservatives, but you can never ever cast anything away as a done deal. But this is definitely an interesting race. I'm super excited about who the nominee will be, and I think it's safe to say that whoever the nominee is will be the next council member. But the political world is always full of surprises. I want to thank you both for being here this evening, for sharing your thoughts, and as always, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And do you have anything in closing that you'd like to say or share, Jorge or John?
No, just want to thank you, Rob, for always getting folks from the neighborhood together. I really think that a strong neighborhood likes strong representatives. Sometimes folks like to make it the opposite, right? And we tend to focus a lot on the the individual candidates, but it really is the communities behind them. And I think podcasts like this one, they really bring neighborhood folks together for intelligent conversations, politically informed conversations. Really do go a long way in uplifting like the way that we can be participating civically. So I want to thank you, Rob, too, for bringing us together as always, and for putting podcasts like this out there to make sure that the people have the facts and good community grounded opinions to be good civic participants. So thank you for that, Rob.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I also want to give a shout out to all the poll workers today and over the last few weeks of early voting. That's a tough job, especially I've been a poll worker myself several times over the years, and you get a whole group of people who maybe don't see each other that often, or maybe are total strangers getting together to try to run a complicated event for a day. And especially today with the new ranked choice voting options, I'm sure it was a lot of confusion. So I give all the poll workers so much kudos. Anyone I would recommend, if you've never tried it before and you have the opportunity to do it, because it's a learning experience and it's a great way to meet neighbors but I'm sure this was a tricky one, and I give them a shout out to all of them. And Rob, thank you as well. I agree 1,000% with what Jorge said about what you do with this. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jorge. And yes, definitely a shout out to all the poll workers. When I voted, they were super attentive and informative, and were really making sure that we understood what the process was like. And so for that, our hats off to the poll workers. Thank you very much for being here this evening. We will be back next week. Actually, at the end of the week, to discuss the results of this race. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.